moving on, our next speaker is Dr. Nori Sivasenani ji, who was kind enough to provide English summaries for the 3 talks before. And he will be presenting his talk in English itself, and he'll be presenting a mother language summary at the end. So his topic is Samanvaya of Vyākaraṇa, Darśana and Vedānta. And just before I open the floor, I'll just give a brief introduction. Dr. Sivasenani ji is an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad, who is presently working as data science manager in Microsoft at Hyderabad. He hails from a traditional and he has studied Sanskrita formally by taking a sabbatical work. He completed his MA in Sanskrit as a gold medalist from Osmania University, and then he did his MPhil in Translation Studies from University of Hyderabad, studying Sanskrit to English translations in Vedanta. His PhD was done in the area of philosophy of grammar and Advaita Vedanta. It was completed under the guidance of Mahamahopadhyaya Professor Korada Subramanian ji in 2016. And under Korada ji, he has extensively studied Vyākaraṇa and Mīmāmsa as well as Vedanta. Following the footsteps of Mahamahopadhyaya Korada ji and the traditional framework, Sivasenani ji also uses the holistic approach to a given issue, applying concepts from all the Vidyasthanas and not restricting himself to one particular field of study at hand. His areas of interest include Vedic studies, Vedanta, Vyākaraṇa, Mīmāmsa and Dharmashastra. Thank you, Sivasenani ji, again for giving your time and sharing your knowledge with us. Please go ahead with the session.
Sure. Thank you, Nitin ji. Let me share my screen. Please let me know if my screen is visible.
Yes, it is visible. Yeah. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Om Namo Brahmadibhyo Brahmavidyā Sampradaya Kartrubhyo Vamsharshibhyo Mahadbhyo Namo Gurubhyah Narayana Samarambham Vyasa Shankara Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Yenakshara Samamnayam Adhigamya Maheshwarat Kritsnam Vyākaraṇam Proktam Tasmai Paninaye Namaha Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Lokashankaram. I'm very fortunate to be in the same stage as my revered teacher, Mahamahopadhyaya Brahmasri, Professor Korada Subramanian Garu was there. In this, if there's any merit in whatever I say, please take it as the light reflected from the sun that Korada ji is. However, all the mistakes are mine. They are the defects of the reflecting material. It is not really good enough to absorb everything. I also note with a lot of pleasure that on the same stage we have Dr. Arjun, who was my Sahadhyaya in University of Hyderabad. And in a very curious case, Brahmasri Jamalamadaka Srinivasa also was my Sahadhyaya in Surabharati when he was very young, actually a kid. Similarly, I share a very good relationship with Professor Paturi Nagaraj Garu, both of us having studied Vyākaraṇa in our academics. So in some senses, it is like I feel very much at home. I thank Nitin ji for giving me this opportunity. Nitin ji, I have one more request of you. I may overshoot my time, so please do alert me at each of these 3 topics. I want to cover in 3 parts. First, my title of this is Samanvaya of Vyākaraṇa, Darśana and Vedānta. Many people know Vyākaraṇa as a Vedanga, but not as a Darśana. In fact, I would say that it is the first Vedānta, even before Shankaracharya wrote Bhashya. So I propose a Samanvaya of these 2 Darshanas. So I'll give a brief introduction to what Vyākaraṇa Darśana is. Then I'll explore what the relationship between these 2 Darshanas is. And then I'll conclude. So Nitin ji, please do alert me if I spend more than 10 minutes on each and any of these 3 topics.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, thank you. So as you can see, the topics are huge. In Vyākaraṇa Darśana, I'll cover the key tenets of what Shabda Brahma is, what Spota is, what Shaktis are, specifically the Kala Shakti, which is the Shakti behind creation, what mukti is according to Vyākaraṇa, and what is Shabdapurva Yoga in Vyākaraṇa. So Vyākaraṇa is both Vedanga and a Darśana. In fact, Mahabhashya, the commentary on Ashtadhyayi, has two intertwined streams called Arthika and Prakriya Bhagas. Anybody who studied Mahabhashya will understand that immediately. Patanjali expounded this school in Mahabhashya through the Arthika Bhagas, the meaning part. And Bhartrihari presented a systematic treatment in his book Vakyapadiyam, which has three kandas, Brahma Kandam, Vakya Kandam, and Pada Kandam. If you look at the contents of Pada Kandam, you will understand very briefly the scheme of Bhartrihari, which starts with Jati Samuddeshaha, then goes to Dravya Samuddeshaha, Sambandha Samuddeshaha, Bhuyo Dravya Samuddeshaha, Guna Samuddeshaha, Dik Samuddeshaha, Sadhana Samuddeshaha, Kriya Samuddeshaha, Kala Samuddeshaha, Purusha Samuddeshaha, Sankhya Samuddeshaha, Upagraha Samuddeshaha, Linga Samuddeshaha, and Vritti Samuddeshaha. If you see language, these are all really concepts of language, and this looks like a theory of, table of contents for a theory of language, right? What is a class in language? What is an entity? What are qualities? What are directions? What is space? What is time? What is, action, and so on and so forth. After Bhartrihari, we have various authors. Hari Vrishabha, who is seen as non-different from Bhartrihari himself, or some people treated him as differently. And then we have Mandana Mishra, Punya Raja, Hela Raja, Kayyata, Bhattoji Dikshita, Kaundabhatta, and Nagesh are the later exponents of this school. So this is a full-fledged Darshana in its own right, and with many writers continuing expansion of this particular school. For example, Nagesha wrote in the Navyanyaya style that Jammalmadaka Srinivasji talked about earlier. The key tenets are already familiar to us. Shabda, Artha, and the relationship is Nitya. We already covered this in the talk on Mimamsa by Dr. Ganesh Ishwar Bhatt. Vedas are Apaurushaya and is a source of knowing the ultimate. Again, this has been covered in the Mimamsa part, so I don't have to spend much time on it. The new part is that Artha is Bauddha, that conceptual. What it means is that, for example, for a Nayayika, if you say Ghataha Asti, there is a pot, there has to be a pot, right? There has to be a physical pot, only there you can talk about a pot being there. But for a Vyākaraṇa, the pot is a conceptual pot. The idea of pot is a pot, right? So this pot exists in his buddhi, right? The astitva of the ghata is Bauddha. That's the meaning of Artha is Bauddha. And this is not so difficult to imagine. In daily language, we see that. For example, in Hyderabad, there is an area called Liberty, right? Where is TTD office in Hyderabad? It is in Liberty. Now, why is this area called Liberty? Long time ago, 1950s, there was a theatre called Liberty. That theatre is no longer there. It has been completely razed down to ground. For the last 50 years, there's no theatre, but still the area is called Liberty, right? So there is no pot, but we all refer to the pot. That happens very often in language. So it is not as difficult or as abstract as we think. We do use it daily. Then Vyākaraṇa also says that there is something called pratibha, an aspect of intellect. It cannot be explained further. And it is the form of, it has the form of arthabodha. It is caused by abhyasa and earlier births and limits comprehension. So this pratibha is the reason why a fish can swim from birth, why peacock has that kind of form, and so on and so forth. This is a natural ability. And this natural yogyata is behind many of the positions of Bhartrihari. One more thing is that Vyākaraṇa, like Nyaya, is a common tool for all schools. We cannot do any Shastra without Nyaya. We cannot do any Shastra without Vyākaraṇa. Any Sahityam also, for example. So Vyākaraṇa is very careful. They are not insistent on one path, but they reconcile different schools. So, for example, there is something called Jativada and Dravyavada. And Vyākaraṇas happily accept both Vadas. So the Jativada says that, ultimately what is meant by a word is only the particular class. Okay, when we say Gauhu, the Gotva Jati is what is being referred to. In Dravyavada, we say no, the entity called cow is being referred to. But for a grammarian, he is happy with both of them. He'll explain how language works with both these things. So these are some of the key tenets of Vyākaraṇas. Their highest principle is Shabda Brahman. And I really don't want to spend too much time on this because we'll keep coming back. It sounds very similar to what we have, how Brahman is described in Advaita. In fact, many of this I'll keep repeating the next one. Know for the time being that this Brahman is not very different from the Brahman of Advaita. Spota is something which is slightly different, which needs some explanation. According to Bhartrhari, he discusses three aspects of Shabda called Pashyanti, Madhyama and Vaikhari. You will see one is missing called Para, but we'll reserve that for later discussion if we come to that. This Pashyanti is discernible only to yogis. Madhyama, which is in Buddhi, it is really as one without any temporal divisions. And Vaikhari is what is spoken and heard. So what this Madhyama means is that you would have heard of the Eureka movement or some great man writing the plot of a novel on the back of a napkin. Or when you want to write a long book or a long essay, you don't type out 10 pages or 20 pages or 40 pages, right? You grasp the essence of it in a very small form, maybe in one A4 size paper. What is really at play is Madhyama. In Madhyama, all your thoughts are there without any divisions and as one. And like in a flash, we talked about Pratibha also, right? Like in a flash, the entire book appears in front of you, and lo and behold, in the next 3 to 4 months, you're simply translating this flash. You're really filling it up. That's how Spota works. The reason why we gave the name Spota to this is that it's an explosion, right? That it all occurs in one flash, and then the idea keeps developing. So this is at the crux of the theory of communication of grammar, that whatever we see, the Vaikhari part, it's only a small tip, right? Behind it, all this prakriya goes on. So the way communication happens according to Spota is, first the speaker has in his mind some object to communicate. At this stage, this is in the form of Spota without any order in its varnas, etc. Then he chooses appropriate Vaikhari sounds to illuminate this Spota. The Vaikhari sound is heard by the listener, and it again triggers the exact object that the speaker had in his mind. Okay, so this is how Shabda communicates. So this is one of the core theories of Vyākaraṇas. Then the Vyākaraṇas hold that there are many Shaktis. Atman and Brahman are non-different, are both of the nature of Shabda. Brahman is one and is also seen as manifold. This is due to different Shaktis of Brahman, but Brahman is non-different from his Shaktis. For example, we know about the different Karakas like Kartrukarakam, Karmakarakam, etc. All these are seen as Shaktis of this particular Dravya. For example, you said Ghataha, Ghatam, Ghatena, etc., Ghataya. These are different aspects of the same Ghata. Similarly, Brahman has different Shaktis. In fact, these Karakas are also seen as Shaktis of Brahman. For a number of Shaktis are recognized, and all manifoldness is explained through these Shaktis. Amongst all these Shaktis, Kala Shakti is the most interesting. According to Vyākaraṇa, the seen world is a projection of Shabda, right? It's a projection. And who is the projector? How is it really operating? Here, Kala Shakti is what is, steps in to explain this. Kala Shakti is actually one, but parts are imposed upon it. Kalas are imposed upon it. The source of differences in Brahman, the Bhava Vikara, what we call Jayate, Vardhate, etc. These 6 modifications, these really resort to the Kala Shakti of Brahman, upon which manifoldness is imposed. Okay, so first, time, which is one, is split, and then afterwards we have one entity also split into many in space. This way, expansion in both time and space are explained. And the Kala Shakti is compared to a Sutradhara of the Loka Yantra, who pulls the strings of some and releases others, thereby causing difference in the world. If this Sutradhara pulls up one string, that man's time is up, and he lets another get some more slack, or releases that, he has more time left. This is how we have to really imagine this. And this way, in the Kala Samudesha, we see that the creation of this world and operation of this world, which is in the very unreal plane, is explained through the Shakti of Brahman called Kala Shakti. Mukti is Saijya, union with the great bull which resides in every being. Moksha is also spoken of as attaining Paramatman. This state is described as without end, Brahmamrutam. There is no end to this particular state. And this is exactly the same as in Advaita. And the sadhana is called Shabdapurva Yoga. So if you look at Vyākaraṇa, if you ask anybody, why do you study Vyākaraṇa? We say that to differentiate sadhu shabdas from asadhu shabdas, to get the correct form of the word. And many sishtas do not ever utter an asadhu shabda, because every time an asadhu shabda is uttered, we get some papam. And when we utter a sadhu shabda, we get punya. That's what's called abhyudaya in Vyākaraṇa language. That's why you see in modern text and linguistics, there are improper forms are given with an asterisk form, whereas in grammar books in Sanskrit, the improper form is never given because a Sishta like Bhattoji Dikshita can never ever utter a apashabda, right? So Vyākaraṇa is all about getting the form of words right, and by using the correct forms of words, our abhyudaya increases. This is very similar to doing karma kanda, wherein our chitta suddhi happens in Vedānta. Now, once one is samskrita by shabda, once one is refined by shabda, one attains siddhi of Paramatma. This is the scheme of Vyākaraṇa and attaining moksha. So we wonder how this is possible to do this. There we have to remember one thing. When we say Gauhu, initially we believe that we are intending to mean the Gotva Jati, right? But upon further reflection, we will know that the substratum for the Gotva Jati is also Brahma, right? So Brahman is the Mahasatta, which has become manifold, as it's said in Upanishad, Bahusyam Yeti. In that way, all the manifoldness has its substratum as base as Brahman, and by being Samskrita by Shabda, by thinking about Shabdas, we slowly understand that all the Shabdas ultimately have their purport only in Brahman. Right? This idea is supported by Ramanujacharya, by Nagesha Bhatta, and so on and so forth. We think that we have different names for different entities, but for the yogi, they all become one. Right? It is through that reflection, right, that we attain Paramatma in the Marga of Vyākaraṇa. That's why this is called Shabda Purva Yoga or Shabda Yoga. Right? Therefore, it is said that Vyākaraṇa is the first step on the ladder to salvation. And he in fact says, Ajihma Raja Paddhatihi, the royal highway to salvation. Right? So the use of correct Shabdas and reflection about Shabda to know its true form, these are the two components that a sadhaka ought to follow as per Vyākaraṇa Siddhanta. I just leave with one shloka to say that many people think that Vedanta expositions, Vedanta writings started with Shankaracharya, apart from Veda. But you just look at this one shloka from, this is the Dravya Samuddesha, I think. Yatra drashta cha drishyam cha darshanam cha vikalpitam asyaivarthasya satyatvam sitaha trayanta vedinaha. Right? Those who know Vedanta, trayanta vedinaha. Trayi is Veda, trayanta is Vedanta. Trayanta Vedin is somebody who knows this Vedanta. That means the Vedantins are seeking refuge, are taking resort to the truth of such an entity in whom the difference of seer, seen, and seeing is not superimposed. And this is not coming from any Advaita Vedanta work. This is coming from a Vyākaraṇa work from Bhartruhari's Vakyapadiyam. And clearly we talk about Vedanta here. Right? So with this I end the introduction to Vyākaraṇa and start with the relationship with Vedanta. Here I would like to cover the philosophy of language and the language of philosophy, the ultimate principle Brahman, how there is Samanvaya, the reality of the world, the process of creation, Shabda Nityatva, and how Veda is the only source and is also an upaya, mukti, and finally, one second, I need to remove this, rejection of spota in Vedanta. Okay. We have a philosophy of language. That's what Spotavada is. And we also do philosophy in a language, right? Whether it is English, Sanskrit, Telugu, Greek, or whatever. So philosophy needs a language. And yet language falls short of describing Brahman. For example, we have this famous Taittiriya Shruti, Ito vacho nivartante aprapya manasasaha. Right? This is also cited in the Brahma Sutras in 3.2.7. When the seer and seen are the same, how can language operate? We are talking about a subject and a predicate, and there being difference amongst them, right? So we need really a philosophy of language or a theory of language to understand how language operates, and only then we can explain our various positions very clearly. There are broadly three theories of language available in the Indian Darśana system. It is from Vyākaraṇa, Mīmāmsa, and Nyaya. Sorry about the typo there, it ought to be Mīmāmsa. So each of these three their own slightly different theories of language. And in the last 1,000 years, Navya Nyaya, which is a combination of Nyaya and Vaiseshika, has taken precision in language to very different heights, so much so that it no longer feels like a language. My good friend Dr. Arjun actually did his PhD just trying to decipher the meaning of one definition in Navya Nyaya pictorially, because through words it's difficult for normal mortals to understand. There's a level of precision that has been observed And each of them offer a different theory of language. And if you look at any Khandana Mandana, it is done resorting to this underlying theory of language, whichever we take. Now, so the theory of language is so important, and Vyākaraṇa offers a theory of language. Let us examine how that agrees with the core principles of Vedanta. Now, I'll just read out some descriptions of Brahman from Vyākaraṇa. This is not from Vedanta, okay? Brahman is one. This is Bhartrhari saying, without beginning, without end, and is imperishable. Brahman has many Shaktis, is not different from its Shaktis. Brahman is seen to have various states like birth, etc. due to Kala Shakti. The world is a transformation. I should actually have said apparent transformation. Vivarta of Brahman. Veda is a reflection of Brahman. Brahman is real, pure, of the nature of knowledge alone, and in the form of Pranava. Brahman is alone, Kevala, is the source of Vedas, has Veda as its body. Brahman is beyond difference of forms and actions, and is pure illumination, beyond Vidya and Avidya. Brahman is described as Mahasatta, the Jati amongst the Jatis, and that it is seen as many Jatis when associated with adjuncts. If I don't say that the source is Vyākaraṇa and simply give these statements, I'm sure everybody will accept them that they are from Vedanta, at least those who have not studied Vedanta in depth. This description of Brahman from the Brahmakanda are completely acceptable to Vedantins. There are further descriptions from the Dravya Samuddesha, right? Where the words Atma, Vastu, Swabhava, Shariram, and Tattva are all synonyms of Dravya. It is said to be eternal. The true entity Brahman is determined by the unreal ones, which have a similar form, right? The tradition received from elders is that there is no difference between Tattva and Atattva. Sarvam Khalvidam Brahma. Eternal Tattva itself is thought of as Atattva due to improper consideration, that is Avidya. The undifferentiated Tattva itself obtains differentiation, right? There is no difference based on time. That which remains when all forms are withdrawn is the truth, eternal Brahman. It neither exists nor does it not exist. It is neither one nor is it different. It is neither commingled nor in a separate state. Neither is it modified nor is it other than modified. So all these things we have in Neti, etc., right? It is not and yet it is known. It is one and yet many. It is commingled and it in separate forms. It is a modification yet unmodified. Okay? And so on and so forth. We have definitions of Brahman which completely agree with Vedanta, right? Vyākaraṇa and Vedanta do not differ at all when it comes to Brahman. That Ṣaḍda is Brahman is acceptable to Vedanta. Their opposition is to the proposition that Ṣaḍda alone is Brahman, right? So the problem comes about what Brahman is it Ṣaḍda or not? Otherwise, there's absolutely no difference, as you can see here. If you look at the reality of the world, right? I put it in quotations because I don't want to say it is completely illusory, because mithya in Sanskrit does not translate completely as illusory, right? It doesn't have atyantika, what you call reality, so to speak. So if we come back to Vyākaraṇa, which says that Brahma is actually one, but parts are imposed on it. This world is an apparent transformation, vivarta of Ṣaḍda Brahman. Okay, like the apparent appearance of an object of dream, the perception of the one unchanging entity in a different form with false divisions as if different from it is vivarta. This is the definition of vivarta from the Svopagnya Vritti of Harivrishava on the same karika, right? If the world is revealed by speech in the wakeful state, in the dream state, speech also becomes the object of all activity, as all cognition is dependent on language. This is a very powerful statement. It is also called relativism of language, etc. in Western philosophy. But our ability to grasp the world is limited by language. In fact, all our cognition is dependent on language, right? So this ability of language to project things is independent of whether the object exists or not. Because even an object like circle of fire, Alata Chakra, you would have taken Diwali sparklers, where you take a sparkler and make some shape, some people write their name. It is one sparkler, right? But we can see as if it is going in a full circle. This is the Alata Chakra. It does not exist at all in reality, but our mind makes it up. Similarly, we have Aditya Gati, etc. So when we talk about the reality, it is seen that mind is the one which really shapes this reality, and mind is limited by what language says. If there is one entity which is all pervasive, which is sitting with me and which is sitting with you, but we don't know the name for it, we don't know the concept of it, we can't even discuss it. Maybe it is there, I don't know, right? Somebody is calling it string theory, somebody is calling it Brahman, somebody is calling it something else, Shunya, Anatta, whatever. if we don't have a name for it, we can't even discuss it. If our language does not grasp this entity, our mind does not grasp it. That's the reason why Vyākaraṇa says the entire world is projected by Shabda. So the process of creation is, in Advaita, it is due to Maya. Usually the creation summarized in Sankhya is the usual explanation. In Spotavada, it is through Kala Shakti, as I just said. So in both schools, this is a Shakti of Brahman, whether it is a Maya or Kala Shakti, and it is covered by the term Avidya. One particular thing which is very striking is, in Adhyasa Bhashya, Shankaracharya says, Avidyavad Vishayani Pratyakshadini Pramanani Shastrani cha. Right? And in the Vakya Kandam, Bhartrihari says, Shastreshu Prakriya Bhedaihi Avidya eva upavarnyate. Right? Both of them accept that all Shastras are with Avidya, are in the realm of Avidya only. Right? So this is the kind of samya between Vedanta and Vyākaraṇa. Ṣaḍdarśana is very important for Vedanta, Mīmāmsa and Vyākaraṇa. We already saw this in Vyākaraṇa. For example, in other orthodox schools like Nyaya, Dr. Arjun talked about this. Udayana proved the existence of Ishvara. That is, Udayana used reasoning to say Ishvara exists. There is also a famous shloka about Udayana going to Puri Jagannath temple. Whereas Mīmāmsakas, Vyākaraṇas and Vedantis, for them Ishvara exists because it is said so by the Veda. Veda is the key source of understanding Brahman, knowing that Brahman is. In fact, that is the difference between Advaita and Bauddha. In the Buddhist term, they accept Veda, so therefore they can describe this Shunya in the same terms as we describe Brahman. But because they don't have faith in Veda, they don't use the term Brahman. Whereas we say that Veda says Brahman is there, therefore Brahman is. Right? That's why the Ṣaḍdarśana is very important. Therefore, Kumarila in Shlokavartikam says, Tasmat Veda Pramanartham Nityatvam Sadhyate. He focuses so much on Nityatva because that is tied to Veda Pramana. And of course, in Vyākaraṇa, we have this famous statement, Siddhe Ṣaḍdartha Sambandhe Lokataha Lokatartha Prayukte Shastrena Dharma Nirnayaha Yatha Laukika Vaidikeshu. In Advaita also we have the same thing in two sutras. I have quoted them here. Shabda iti chenna atha prabhavat pratyaksha anumana abhyam. I'm sorry about this typo here. It will be Mahaprana. Tayeva nityatvam. This is also maintained in Vedānta. I'm not going more into why Ṣaḍdarśana is important for Pramanata. Now, these three schools are very similar, we said.
Your second 10 minutes is up, so just
okay, sure. Let me go faster. For Advaita and Vyākaraṇa, Veda is the only source of knowing Brahman, right? So, in this particular sutra that I've quoted here, the Brihadaranyaka Smriti is given, right? Which is Atra Pita Apita Bhavati and so on up to Vedaha Avedaha. That means Veda is useful for both Vyākaraṇas and Vedantis only till the dawn of knowledge. It's an upaya. Upaya is something like a scaffolding which you put up to build the roof or to go up a building. But once the building is made, you throw it away. Right? In Telugu, we call it Eru Dati Tappa Tagaletam. Right? So you use a small whatever thing to cross a boat kind of thing, bamboo raft to cross a stream, and after that you burn it because you have no more any use for it. Veda has such a status in both Vyākaraṇa and Advaita. Right? It very clearly says Prapti Upayaha Anukarasya Tasya Veda. Tasya is Brahmanaha here. So Vedanta and Vyākaraṇa are the only schools which explicitly acknowledge that Veda is an upaya. Moksha is very similar in both of them. It is attainment of Brahman through removal of avidya, and which is facilitated by accumulation of punya or abhyudaya. And in Vedanta, we stress on injunctions of Veda. Vyākaraṇa additionally says use the correct forms of Shabda. As already stated, Spota has been rejected by Shankaracharya in the Devadadhikaranam. This rejection occurs in the first Adhyaya, which is devoted to Samanvaya, and not the second Adhyaya devoted to refutation. This is one note. And this refutation is non-critical. What do you mean by non-critical? If Spota is not accepted by Vedanta, there is no harm done to Vedanta's key thesis. But they simply follow the Varnavada of Mīmāmsa. Right? There are two possible reasons given for this. One is called Pratikopasana, and the other one is that maybe Shabda Brahman should be posited as the lower Brahman of Advaita. What is Pratikopasana? I'll just tell. In Brahma Sutras 4.1.4 and 4.1.5, this Pratikopasana is described. Pratika is an image, is a symbol. For example, Sun, Akasha, Agni, all these are the Pratikas of Brahman, right? In all these, the Upasaka should not think of himself as non-different from the Pratika, but rather, see, for example, we say in everyday Sandhyanam, Asau Aditya Brahma. Then we should think ourselves as, when we want to think of ourselves as, Aditya, it should that we should treat this Aditya as Brahman, and should treat ourselves as non-different from Brahman, but not focus on the Pratika. Okay. Aditya can be viewed as Brahman, but not the other way around. That is the important part of 4.1.5, right? So the problem for Vedantins with Vyākaraṇas is, you people go and say that Brahman is Shabda. That is not acceptable. Shabda is Brahman. We are completely happy, right? The Pratika can be Brahman, not an issue at all. So this is one difference. The reason why Shankaracharya mildly refuted this particular thing. The other one I talked about, right? The Shabda Brahman is lower. To paucity of time, I'm not covering this. But Advaita accepts two Brahmans, higher Brahman, lower Brahman. The moment you say Shabda Brahman is lower Brahman, even the small difference completely vanishes. And Advaita completely accepts Vyākaraṇa. Now, why should we accept this? Okay, there is this famous quotation from Chitsukacharya in his Tattva Pradipika, which says that Vyavahare Bhattanayahi Changikarat, right? So Advaita accepts Mimamsa Nyayas in the Vyavaharika plane. Okay, what is the reasons? Both Shastras are concerned with fixing the meaning of Veda. They take Shabda to be Nitya, give highest importance to Shruti, and so on and so forth, right? They have a difference. It is reconciled by limiting the application of Bhattanaya to Vyavahara. Bhattanaya completely fails in Paramartha, right? Why? In Paramartha, the Triputi is not there, right? We don't have Jnata, Jnaya, and Jnanam. Then how will the theory of language of Mimamsa operate? Therefore, they stop in Mimamsa support the Paramarthika plane. Okay. Now, there are other limitations imposed by the toolkit of Mimamsa. For example, Jati, everybody says, Na Jatau Jati. This is a Vaiseshika position actually, but everybody agrees it. But Brahman is a substrate of Jati, right? So there is, in fact, we have a Shruti also called Vācārambhana Shruti, where the quality of everything like Agni, Surya is shown to be Brahman, right? So Vedanta does not accept. In fact, Vedanta does not even accept Jati as Nitya, right? For them, the only Nitya Vastu is Brahman. And we saw in Vyākarana how they say that the Mahasatta is the underlying substrate of all Jatis. So Mimamsa, if you accept, this problem comes. Then if you accept Lakshana, Lakshana can be twofold, Jahal Lakshana or Ajahal Lakshana. Again, due to paucity of time, I'm not explaining in greater detail, but the secondary meaning can have a connection to the primary meaning or completely cut off. Advaita has now a third Lakshana called Jahad Ajahad Lakshana. This Jahad Ajahad Lakshana is a source of much criticism. But if we now go to Vyākarana, the same issue is resolved using Akhandarthavadaha, right? For example, in the sentence Tattvamasi, the problem is that Tat and Tvam refer to the same entity using two different classes of words, Tat and Tvam, right? And therefore, we have to have both Jahad Lakshana and Ajahad Lakshana to explain it. If we take the Mimamsa framework, Lakshana is a Mimamsa concept. But if we take the Akhandarthavada, right from Samasas to this particular thing, a single theory can explain all the words used if we resort to Vyākarana. Further, if you look at Vyākarana and Mimamsa, Advaita, they are both idealistic schools. What is an idealistic school? We talked about Bauddhartha earlier, right? So, in an idealistic school, the meaning is a concept. It's completely conceptual. It does not have to exist in reality. Whereas a realistic school accepts an entity only if it exists in reality. Okay. Now, earlier, 1,000 years earlier, this was okay because Yajna was important. Therefore, Mimamsa was at the center of everything. If Advaita resorted to Mimamsa, there's no problem, right? Though Mimamsa is a realistic school and Advaita is an idealistic school. What happened in the last 1,000 years, especially due to the development of Navyanyaya and taking support of Navyanyaya, various other schools of Vedanta like Visishtadvaita or Advaita have come. They resort to developments in Nyaya to refute Advaita. And usual answer of Advaita is that, no, what you are saying does not apply in the Paramarthika school. Why? They attack this realistic, the contradiction between the realism of the framework used by Advaita and the idealism which is a thesis of Advaita. Right? Now, if we were to use instead of the Bhattanyaya, Vyākaraṇa, then we have a toolkit of an idealistic school, and this would solve the problems of the persistent attacks on Advaita. It's not that attack really makes it different, but this kind of makes Advaita difficult to understand, because every sadhaka is saying, oh, I'm confused whether you're talking about the Vyavaharika plane, Pratibhasika plane, or the Paramarthika plane. So in summary, if I have to say, Vyākaraṇa and Vedānta can help each other by being, they have the same kind of relation between interpretation tools and sadhana. Vyākaraṇa lacks schools of sadhana, and Advaita needs a better interpretation toolkit than what Mimamsa offers. I know it's a bit bold, but this is my submission. Okay, so this is a quotation from my thesis, where Shankaracharya established the Darśana of Advaita in its full glory and supplies all the essential elements that the establishment Darśana requires. Bhartrhari provides the linguistic framework, which is so important to show that Advaita is tenable, and also provides for an alternate presentation without the so-called negative aspects, which have become very prominent in Advaita. The other aspect I didn't talk about, Bhartrhari presents Advaita, he presents it in a very positive way, not in a negative way, not in this neti fashion, but that is another thing. With this, I end my talk on the Samanvaya between Vyākaraṇa and Vedānta. I now start the summarization in Telugu as per the request of the organizers. Namassabhaye. వ్యాకరణానికి అద్వైతానికి ఉన్న సమన్వయం చెప్పాలి అంటే ముఖ్యంగా మనం 3 విషయాలు చూడవచ్చును. అసలు వ్యాకరణ దర్శనంలో ఉన్నది ఏమిటి? వీటిలో ఈ వ్యాకరణం అన్నది వేదాంగంగానే చాలా మందికి పరిచయం, కానీ ఇదొక దర్శనంగా కూడాను ఎంతో మంది గొప్పవారు దాని గురించి రాసి ఉన్నారు. Yeah, it started again.
Yeah, go ahead.
పాణిని మొదలు నాగేశ భట్టు వరకు కూడాను వ్యాకరణం దర్శనం గురించి ఎంతో మంది మేధావులు రాసి ఉన్నారు. అందులో ముఖ్యంగా శబ్ద బ్రహ్మ గురించి చెప్తారు వాళ్ళు. ఈ శబ్ద బ్రహ్మను వైయాకరణ వర్ణిస్తుంటే వేదాంతులకు ఎక్కడా కూడాను ఎటువంటి విరోధం కూడా కనపడదు. విరోధం అంతా ఎక్కడ వస్తుంది అంటే స్ఫోటలో వస్తుంది. ఈ స్ఫోట అంటే ఏమిటి అంటే, మనము మాట్లాడే ఏదైతే వైఖరి శబ్దం ఉందో అది అవిభక్తముగా మన మనస్సులో మధ్యమ రూపంలో ఉండి విస్ఫోటము ద్వారా అది వైఖరి రూపంగా వృద్ధి చెందుతుంది. ఇది స్ఫోట సిద్ధాంతం యొక్క ముఖ్యమైన అంశము. దీనిని శంకరాచార్యులు దేవతాధికరణంలో ఖండించి ఉన్నారు. ఏమని అంటే, భగవాన్ ఉపవర్షులు వర్ణవాదాన్ని స్వీకరించారు, అది సరిపోతుంది కదా శబ్ద నిత్యత్వానికి, అందుచేత ఈ స్ఫోట అనేది అనవసరమైన కల్పన అని చెప్పి వారు ఖండించున్నారు. కాబట్టి ఈ ఖండనలో మనం గమనించాల్సిన అంశం ఏమిటి అంటే, పరమత ఖండనము ద్వితీయాధ్యాయంలో జరుగుతుంది, కానీ ఇది ప్రథమాధ్యాయంలో జరిగింది. ఈ ఖండన చేయటం అద్వైతముకు అవసరం, అత్యంతం అవసరమా అంటే అలా కూడా కనపడదు మనకి. స్ఫోటను ఒప్పుకున్న అద్వైత సిద్ధాంతానికి వచ్చిన నష్టమేమీ కనపడదు. తథాపి శంకరాచార్యులు స్ఫోటను ఖండించారు అన్నది మనం అంగీకరించవలసిన విషయం. ఇక వ్యాకరణంలో వేరే అంశాలు తీసుకుంటే, ఈ బ్రహ్మ పదార్థానికి శక్తులు ఉంటాయి. ఈ శక్తులు బ్రహ్మను వేరువేరు కాదు, వారికి అభేదమే అని చెప్పబడింది. ఈ శక్తుల్లో ముఖ్యంగా కాలశక్తి ద్వారా సృష్టి ప్రక్రియ అంతా జరుగుతుంది. ఇది వేదాంతంలో చెప్పిన దానికన్నా భిన్నంగా కనపడుతుంది మనకి. ముక్తి విషయానికి వస్తే 2 దర్శనాలను ఎటువంటి భేదము లేదు. బ్రహ్మత్వమును పొందడమే ముక్తి. దీనికి సాధనము శబ్దపూర్వ యోగం అని భర్తృహరి చెప్పి ఉన్నాడు. ఈ శబ్దపూర్వ యోగం అంటే ఏమిటి అంటే, ప్రతి శబ్దానికి అర్థం జాతి అని మీమాంసకులు అంటారు. ఈ జాతికి కూడా ఆధారం ఏమిటి అంటే బ్రహ్మ అన్నారు. సాధారణంగా నా జాతౌ జాతి అని జాతి యందు వేరొక జాతిని వైశేషికులు, నైయాయికులు వీరందరూ ఒప్పుకోరు. తథాపి వేదాంతంలోను వ్యాకరణ మతంలోను ప్రతి జాతికి కూడాను ఆధారభూతంగా ఒక మహాసత్త ఉన్నది. ఆ మహాసత్తనే బ్రహ్మ. కాబట్టి మనము శబ్దములను బాగా సాధన చేసినట్లయితే కనుక ప్రతి శబ్ద ప్రయోగంలోనూ కూడా మనకు బ్రహ్మ కనపడవచ్చును. ఇదే ఈ శబ్దపూర్వ యోగము అనే సాధన వైయాకరణ సిద్ధాంతంలో. వ్యాకరణానికి అద్వైతానికి మనం సామ్యం చూసినట్టయితే కనుక బ్రహ్మ వివరణలో కానివ్వండి, ఈ ప్రపంచం యొక్క మిథ్యాత్వంలో కానివ్వండి, సృష్టి ప్రక్రియలో కానివ్వండి, శబ్ద నిత్యత్వం గురించి కానివ్వండి, వేదాన్ని ప్రతివారు ప్రమాణంగా స్వీకరించిన మీమాంస, వేదాంత, వ్యాకరణ దర్శనాల్లో మాత్రమే వేదం అన్నది ముఖ్యంగా ఉన్నది. ఇప్పుడు సాంఖ్యులకు వేదం ప్రమాణమే. కాకపోతే ప్రధానం గురించి అసలు వేదం ఒక్క మాట మాట్లాడలేదు, కానీ వాళ్ళు ప్రధానాన్ని ఒప్పుకుంటారు. నైయాయికులకు వస్తే వాళ్ళు ఈశ్వరుని ఒప్పుకున్నారు, కానీ దాంతో వేదంతో ఏమీ పని లేదు. వారు అంత తర్కంతోనే ఈశ్వరుని యొక్క సత్తాను వాళ్ళు తెలిపి ఉన్నారు. కాకపోతే ఈ మీమాంసలో కానివ్వండి, వ్యాకరణ దర్శనంలో కానివ్వండి, వేదాంతంలో కానివ్వండి, వేదము ద్వారా మాత్రమే ఈ బ్రహ్మ కానీ ధర్మము కానీ మనకి తెలుస్తుంది. కాబట్టి వేదం చాలా ప్రముఖమైన స్థానంలో ఉంది దర్శనాల లోపల. అట్లాగే ముక్తి విషయంలో ఇంతకుముందు మనం పరిశీలించున్నాము. రెండిట్లో అత్యంతము సామ్యం ఉంది. స్ఫోట నిరాకరణ అనేది మాత్రం ఉన్నది. దీనికి కారణం ప్రతీకోపాసన అని పెద్దలు చెప్తారు. అంటే ఇవాళ మనం శబ్దబ్రహ్మను ఒప్పుకున్నట్టయితే రేపొద్దున ఇంకోటి వచ్చి రసబ్రహ్మ అని, ఇంకొకతను వచ్చి గంధ బ్రహ్మ అని, ఇంకొకతను రూప బ్రహ్మ అని, ఈ విధంగా చెప్పుకుంటూ పోతారు. అప్పుడు ఈ సిద్ధాంతం గట్టిగా నిలవదు. కాబట్టి శంకరాచార్యులు ప్రథమాధ్యాయంలో ఈ స్ఫోటను నిరాకరించారు అని ఈ గురువులు చెప్పగా విన్నది పెద్దలు కూడా చెప్తూ ఉంటారు ఈ విషయం. ఈ విధంగా వ్యాకరణానికి వేదానికి అత్యంత సామ్యం ఉన్నప్పటికీ ఒక్కటే ఒక అంశం ఏమంటే చంద్రుడికి నూలుపోగులాగా ఈ స్ఫోట యొక్క నిరాకరణ ఉన్నది. దీనికి కూడా కారణం మనం తెలుసుకొని ఉన్నాము. ఇటువంటి సమయంలో బౌద్ధార్థమని ఒప్పుకునే ఈ రెండు దర్శనాలు పరస్పరము ఉపయోగకరంగా ఉన్నట్టయితే కనుక వ్యవహారే భాట్టనయ అను నియమం అనుసరించి ఏదైతే అద్వైతం నడుస్తున్నదో దాని ద్వారా వస్తున్న విమర్శలు ఏవైతే ఉన్నాయో వాటన్నిటి కూడా తెరవేయడానికి మనకి కుదురుతుంది. ఈ మీమాంస యొక్క న్యాయమును వదిలి వైయాకరణ నయమును అద్వైతం అవలంబించినట్లయితే, ఇప్పుడు మనకి శతదూషణి అని చెప్పి ఒక గ్రంథం ఉన్నది దేశికుల వారిది. ఇటువంటి వాటిలో దూషణలన్నీ కూడాను చాలా సులువుగా మనము ఖండించవచ్చును. ఇంతటితో అన్ని విషయాలు సర్వం సమంజసమని నమ్ముతున్నాను. I end with this, Nitinji. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sivasenani ji. It was a very interesting, very insightful talk, and I'm sure I think there is a lot more material to explore in the topic, and I'll get in touch with you offline regarding this. Thank you again for taking time for this session.